Record on this computer, and we are recording. Good morning. We are with Sherleen Melendez, school psychologist at International School of Kuala Lumpur. Thanks for taking the time out. So I wanted to talk with
You're
you
welcome.
around your experiences with signs of suicide. So what is signs of suicide?
Well, Science of Suicide has been a program that's been developed over the years as a preventative measure for middle school and high school. And basically, what we're trying to do is with the program, it's just get a good feeling of how the students are doing and inform the student population of what are the signs of suicide, like it says. But also just taking in consideration what the signs of depression looks like, and educate the students on what they could look potentially not only with themselves in terms of how they're feeling, how they're doing, but also I think the program does really well in letting students know how they can help other peers that are going through the same situation that is described in terms of signs of suicide or depression if they look at that. So, how to make referrals, how to connect with the adults in the building to be able to help those students that are going through some of these things that could potentially be impacting them. So that's kind of a brief summary of what the program is.
What, what
It
grade level
definitely
do you work with it on?
I know that their school does it in middle school, but we work with it. I work with the program more in the grade 10, but we could do potentially you could do it with any of the high school grades that you have available in your school. It's the program is designed for both.
And when you say the program, there's kind of two components. One is the educational side, and the other side is the screener. So what comprises the educational side? You mentioned around teaching them some skills. How long is the lesson? Is it something that they provide you, or what?
It could take a solid 2 hours because the program is assigned to be a more like a discussion based resource, right? It gives the students opportunities, it gives questions, it gives, like you said, videos and education wise signs of things that you can look at. And then students are expected to speak in groups and to speak within a format that they can actually make some sense of the content, right? And that's the first part of the program where students again go through those signs, talk about the case scenarios. They actually do really good at presenting a few case scenarios where they can observe what are those signs in real life, right? And they have also they have testimonies of people who have gone through similar situations, and people then explain how they went through, how the process of identifying how they were feeling, and then what was the process of getting help, right? So all of these is discussed at the beginning of the educational part, and then you do the screening part, which is really important because it's what gives us the feedback as to how are they doing actually with the signs of depression. And then that's how we know if there has been other signs of suicide. We do then the screeners depending on how we get the information we get in terms of the depression signs. And both of the parts are really important, but I think that that's the actionable part, that's the takeaway part where we can work with the student population and make sure that based on those and the data that we get, we tier those services, or we support the students at the level that they need, right? And that's good about the screener as well. We have like certain questions in there that are sensitive that we know automatically, okay, if this they're answering a yes to this question, we got to immediately do some sort of risk assessment in terms of determining what are the risks of the students to actually go would potentially have suicide. And then basically if not, then if there are a few of them, then we know that we still have to support the student and gather a little bit more information, but maybe not um as concerning as like the student is about to have some sort of action immediately.
So I've pulled up the screener on our shared screen right now, and it's just 7 questions, yes, no. So I imagine it just takes the students, a few minutes to fill this in.
Yes, very brief.
And it is not anonymous, correct?
No, it's not. I mean, the students, we give them the option of putting the student ID number so that the people, they're mostly in a group. So, if the neighbors are there, they don't want to see that, they can do that, and then we look for the student ID number. But no, it's not. They should put their names on, and ultimately, we know who's in that class and how to reach out if we need to as well.
So I imagine number four, have you ever thought seriously about killing yourself? If a student ticked yes, this would prompt
Yes.
a more immediate response.
Yes, and the number 4 or 5, both of them are high, the sensitive items for us to know. Do we need to do a risk assessment immediately? And yeah,
So how would that
because
conversation go from your end? You've done this lesson with the class over a couple of. We actually schedule this in health period. So you go in, you introduce yourself, you do interactive lessons. There's video discussion. There's a mini lecture, so to speak, and then you have them do this screener, and then you've collected them all, and you see a couple of kids that have ticked 4 or 5, and so you prioritize them. How's that conversation typically go from your end?
yes. So what we try to, again, we try to, one of the goals or the outcomes of the program is to be able to connect them with the appropriate resources. And grade 9 and 10, especially, students maybe have a relationship with their counselor, maybe know who the school psychologist is. And part of what we try to do with having this kind of program is connecting them with who their counselors are and creating that relationship. So part of that is that I do some sort of activities, some sort of like just informal stuff so that they get to know me as a psychologist in the process. But also, we go through the process of reminding them at the end, if you have a situation like this and you need to connect with somebody, who are the people that you can connect and why are these people important, and connecting with them. So we talk about counselors, we talked about just family members that will be helpful in passing on the information if there's anything. It's that they have the acronym of ACT, which is act, care, and tell. Which that tell piece goes really big on identifying who can you talk to, and again, and it outlines a several group of people that the students should know about. And basically, if we try to connect after that piece of telling them how you can actually go through about saying and reporting it, then they know that part of the outcome of the program is connecting them. So at the end of the session, or actually we do warn them at the beginning and say, listen, we know we're trying to get to a conversation here, that it's not easy, that may be sensitive, that you may potentially have more questions. And after this, we do have a conversation, a follow-up conversation with some students, because we identify that there are some needs that we need to do, but also because we want to get feedback on the program. So if we call them, it could be potentially as a how the program worked in that session. What are the feedback that they can give us about what we did? So there's that piece, but there's also the second piece that, again, then if we identify, we say it's a anonymous, like we got to check in. That part is there. But then the second part, then we do say, we try to have the conversation, then go maybe into like, this is the program, this is what happened, but we did the screener, and we noticed that you answered this way, right? And then we start communicating with the students in terms of like, why did you answer yes under this? And has this been something that you had recently? And then depending on their answers, then we go into a formal risk assessment situation. That was a long answer for but I just wanted to put the context of how we build that we paved the road to say, there's people that you can connect with. This is what the program does. And after that, we get the feedback and we get the people. And if somebody like a counselor calls you to have this conversation, or myself as a psychologist, then shouldn't be a total surprise, because we have given them the heads up of what we do with the program. And then the second part is kind of identifying, the areas that he or she said, yes, there have been some concerns, and then turning that into the formal risk assessment interview,
Yeah.
obviously with that sensitivity of knowing that if they answered yes, it's not going to be a conversation that goes really happy or easily or smoothly, and it takes that part of like us saying, we know that this is something that's been hard for you. Tell me how it's like for you, and dig deeper into that.
So, for example, a kid might have ticked, yes, I did think of suicide when I was in seventh grade. I was going through a really tough time. Actually, I talked to my mom, and, I've really not had any thoughts then. So that might be a lower priority sort of kid,
Yes.
as opposed to a kid, in their discussion, they start sharing that, oh, the thoughts are still there. And then we have
Yeah.
a secondary tool that we might utilize at this point that goes into more the suicidal ideation and plan, like, how dangerous
Yes.
is this really?
Yeah, and that's definitely, that changes. It's good how you're setting the two scenarios, because that's usually what happens. Either the student says, well, in seventh grade, I had this, I don't know, somebody died and I had this really tough time in my life, but now I'm actually okay. And I've been like, I had, for example, students say kind of like, I have this seasons and moments through the year that I know that I'm going to feel more sad. I don't know why it has happened, but you know I work with that, and then I say, okay, well, what kind of help have you received? Right? It's not like they're saying right now I'm feeling this way, but I know that there is a potential pattern, right? Because they have identified that about themselves. So my approach in that moment is, well, maybe that's kind of like an in-between student where it's not in the moment, so we don't have to necessarily do something, but then I recognize if this student has actually potentially a certain some sort of mental health concern here, do we need to follow up? And then of course that brings up the parent communication and say, we have noticed this, is there anything else we can do, from our side? But we are recommending, that the students check in with the counselor, the psychologist every so, and then, have some sort of potential support aligned with it. Now, if we do have a student that says, yes, no, I last week, I actually felt this way, and then we dig a little bit deeper into maybe what's happening with them in that moment. And then we get to the part of asking, if sometimes people do it with the numbers of like from 0 to 10, how likely are you about to do this? If you had something that you could do right now to just check out or not be here in this world, and some of them would say, I'm a 7, or I'm 0, no, I'm really don't, or maybe like a 3, because they have actually said that yes, they've thought about it. And then you go from there to say, is this something that some people are, you also want to look into, if they say yes, I'm actually have thought of this, then why have you not tried this before? If you have tried this before, then you could have those two potential outcomes there, and try to see what are the areas that will protect them. What are the reasons that are keeping them alive or not trying to do a suicide attempt? So that those are the kind of conversations that you also want to have within that potential risk assessment conversation.
Just a couple more things I notice about the screener itself. It says in the last 4 weeks, so it's sort of the current thinking. And several of the items are really, not necessarily an indicator of suicide per se, like have you had less energy than you usually do? Or, has it seemed like you couldn't think as clearly or as fast as usual?
Hmm.
Honestly, that is all of us on any given day, especially during these weird pandemic days. But the second part of this really is the scoring behind it, and a higher score
Yeah.
overall or on questions 4 and 5 is super key. And then they also do ask the student right here, who are trusting adults here. Um, and that's another indicator of, like where we can intervene. Now, I want to go back to parents for a moment. Um, with yeah, are parents given permission for you to do the screener? Are they informed? Like, how does that side of it work, firstly?
So, because we do it within the health curriculum, like you were mentioning, in this case, the health teachers do align with the parents, and they have there's different many ways you can do or go about this. What I know that the teachers did in this case, they sent letters and they said basically this is what we're going to discuss. In most cases, we have an opt out. Like if you don't want your child to be part of the program, you could say no. Like I don't want them to participate. So there's that opt out sort of situation, but in most cases, it is done for the general student population. So there's not like a yes, I give consent
Right.
situation
Have
for
you
every
do you
student.
do you have any idea how many students or families have opted out?
I don't know because for this week, for example, I mean for this week, no, for this year, again the health teachers did that part, but I don't think we had that many students. Like I know when I saw the rosters, we pretty much had pretty much everybody. And where it gets tricky is that we had some online students that we didn't necessarily include at that point because we couldn't the feedback from the SOS team in terms of doing it online with students that you cannot appropriately give them the support, then we didn't include those students because of that reason. So that's where it gets tricky to know if there were some students that opted out, if they were online. I don't know that part. But yes, I would say that most of them were there for sure, and the ones that were not there were either from an online reason or because they opted out. But maybe like two students in the whole cohort of the 10th graders, so not that many for sure.
Yeah. Now we do this in grade 8 and again in grade 10, and this is a grade level curriculum as well as a grade level screener. One of the questions I'm positing is, would it be worthwhile doing other screeners through the whole school or through a particular grade level? For example, anxiety or OCD or ADHD or whatever. What's your thoughts on,
No,
broad-based screening?
I think that it would be. I mean, recently we had an anxiety sort of panel and discussion in our school, and I think that was helpful too because it raised so much awareness, right, of what people that have clinical anxiety deal with, and even if they're not, then what are the signs, right? And I think it raised up a good understanding in our community, and we had parents come and students kind of respond to that, which I think was wonderful. So yes, if we could have the potential screeners and do the time within different, I don't know, classes or settings where we identify students ahead of time, we are being proactive. We're not waiting for students to be in a very delicate, sensitive state where they could be actually medically harmed at that point. We want to catch students at a point where they have minor symptoms or signs and that we can work with before we get into a real concern of situation. So
Now,
I
if you
think
were, the president of the school, what would be your scope and sequence of screeners? Like, would you do an anxiety one, at a particular grade level? Would you do it every year? Like,
I think I would do. That's a great, Sean. You definitely had. Now you have me thinking. If I were to manage the curriculum, I would certainly have some sort of maybe during the wellness classes, right? Or every school has its own. We have the what we call the advisory, right? And I would do some sort of advisory check in, maybe every quarter, have some sort, like we did depression and signs of suicide maybe first. I would do the anxiety probably second. I would have also things in terms of mood disorders and things related to emotional health, because I think a lot of students don't know how to, when do we get, everybody has moody days, but when is it a concern? I think that students need that education piece as well, in terms of how to be able to recognize, oh, this is not just the usual, this is something else, and I should probably learn a little bit more about how to take care of myself or do something about it before it becomes, it gets out of control. So I think I would have something quarterly in terms of, mental health education, but also pair it with a referral, like the screener and referral if we need to do it in terms
Well,
of that way.
and the beauty of the SOS as a model is, firstly, it
Mhm,
is
mhm,
education. It
mhm.
is skill building because the ACT model and the feedback
Exactly.
from
Yep.
the students that I've talked with have indicated, actually, that was interesting and it was helpful. And I feel
Mhm.
like I could, be more positive to intervene. And certainly we've all had that experience where a kid comes with a friend and really they are,
Yes.
the supporting cast in the other kid's drama, but it's because they were willing to take them by the hand, so to speak, that has made a world of difference. And so the curriculum empowers. The screener, is certainly a cause for reflection, but it also is now, that pyramid idea. So everybody gets an education about this particular mental health issue. In this case, it's suicide and suicidal ideation and depression. But then the level two is we've now identified some kids that need some more specialized attention, and that may cause us to go to really sort of almost crisis response if a kid is truly in danger of hurting themselves and in danger of killing themselves. And that's, where we would rally the troops, so to speak, and, utilize our community resources and stuff. So, if you were designing a model, I think you wouldn't have to look very far beyond the SOS as sort of a scope and sequence. Now, SOS is a proprietary system and it involves some training and payment. Do you want to talk about the training payment side?
I want to say I don't know how the training, the official training goes. I know I got trained in my internship year a while ago, but it wasn't the formal training, and I don't want to say that there isn't a formal training from them. Um, so I gotta check that part. In terms of the cost, I think it depends on if you're renewing your membership with them. It goes all the way from like 300 to $500. It's US dollars. So that's basically the cost of it, and it lasts between I think it's a year, about a year. There you go. So
So
it depends on
$200 for online virtual training right now. They actually did virtual training before the COVID, so they were ready. And then the high school program is 3 to 500. Middle school is 3 to 500. It depends on the size of your cohort. Essentially for a larger school, you're looking at about $1,200 to get started, and then an annual renewal of roughly $1,000. And really, that enables you to protect a lot of
yes.
people.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, absolutely. It is cost worth it for sure. But yeah, definitely it's doable, and it's one of those resources that you want to have handy in your school for sure.
is there anything I haven't asked you about signs of suicide or screeners in general that you are like, oh, this is my thing I want to champion?
I think you've asked pretty much all the questions and you've guided the conversation pretty well. I think the my soapbox or whatever I could say in terms of, again, if I'm being too repetitive, it's be proactive and not just wait for students to be, looking for help at the point of their darkest moment, but they should learn ahead of time what are the potential things that they could have. And not only, I think that this is also from a medical perspective, is like you do no harm, right? And that's true. We don't want students to suffer and all of that, but on the other end, when we do have that screener perspective or proactive perspective, we treat students from, we're building health, right? And this is more the positive psychology model, where we want students to flourish. We don't want to wait for students to be having this major issues, right? So I think it's a good perspective for from that multi-tier support system, where we're doing something for the general population, and then just building from that. We have so much more potential in terms of when we are taking action to help them than if we, if we wait, the wait to fail model, right? So this is why it's so important to have those screeners and to have be able to build health rather than just wait, for students to be actually sick from a mental health perspective or even a physical perspective as well. So I think that's the part that it's really important for all educators or counselors that work around schools is we want to keep that perspective. We want to build health. We want to be able to give them the better quality of life that they can have. And one of the ways to do that is definitely if we take action proactively through screeners and programs like this that are not the wait to fail model. So I think that's the summary of it all.
Awesome. And the other thing I wanted to highlight was your notion there of do no harm. And one of the misconceptions that continues to fester out there is mentioning the S word is dangerous. You'll be planting a seed, like you
Oh,
just taught them how to suicide. And it's actually quite the opposite in
yes,
asking the
yes,
question directly, are you thinking of killing yourself? And as you know, angst ridden that question can be to ask, it opens a conversation and actually takes a whole lot of burden
absolutely.
away
No,
from the young person.
absolutely. No, I got to agree with that 100%. First, because evidence based, research supports the fact that the more we talk about it, the more conscious we bring about the process and the more students get help if they're going through something. But the second part of that is like you're saying, once we have those conversations with students, we are liberating them of a heavy burden that they've been taking on for quite a long time. So absolutely, we see more potential health benefits in that than actually bringing that into like, oh, because I talked about this today, then I'm going to do it. That's actually not what the research has proven. And yeah, definitely we got to be able to take action. So thank you for
Okay.
mentioning.
Well, that's so fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll let you get back to your day and your little one there. You have a fantastic weekend as we head into the end of the school year here. Woohoo!
Thank you, Sean. Take care. Bye bye.